At the end of the last video I did add the statement to say that this video was going to cover the milling and drilling of the holes for the forks and the stem. However, every time I look at this big lump of aluminium, my thoughts change. The downside with progressing with the drilling and milling of the holes at this point would be that I would need to actually go through the full thickness of the lump of material here, and to actually get those holes to size I will be drilling and then boring them using a boring tool. Boring through 50mm of aluminium will be quite a chore in 3 separate holes. It would be much easier and quicker for me to only have to bore the required thickness, which for those 3 points is 25mm. My current thinking is that I will actually remove the excess material. So if we look at the drawing, I'm referring to the shaded areas at the top left and right, which is effectively the area behind the back of the yokes. To reduce the effort required in chopping off these corners, I'm first going to chain drill along the long sides, then I'll finish off with a hacksaw. My preferred approach for the chain drilling is to get the block aligned on the table, use a center drill before then running the drill through. So in front of us what we've got here is the block bolted at an angle. At the moment it's not clamped down very tight because I'm going to use the wiggler to align to the little line that is scribed just to the left of the masking tape. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the wriggler with the needle. I'll steady it and then align the table so that the needle is directly above this end of the line, and then I'll run the table up and down using a little plastic mallet to knock the stock material around until it's lined up. Then I'll tightly clamp it down. I'll be spacing the drill holes about 11mm apart. I don't want to run the risk of the drill merging into another hole and causing me problems. I had to move the camera back because of that rather large swarf that was flying off from the last drill, the 10mm drill. Both corners have now been removed using the chain drilling and hacksawing method. What I'm going to do now is just run the big end mill along both the faces. In fact, I've already done the far side from the camera, so I'm just going to clean up these jagged edges from that chain drilling before we move on to the next operation. Just a note, this is not the final finish of this face, or in fact the other face. This is just to get rid of those horrible sharp bits from the chain drilling. There's probably another 4 or 5mm that needs to come off this face and the other side as well, but we'll pick that up later on. Do excuse the noise in the background, we are in the midst of a summer storm here in the UK. Badly needed in all fairness after the very dry spring we've had. I think most people are going to be welcoming the rain for their gardens. Okay, that aside, as we can see here, we have the block of aluminium with the 2 corners removed and a rough finish put on those 2 surfaces. There is still material to come off, so they're by no means the final faces. This is how the view will look front on, so the front elevation, again taken from the CAD drawing. It's a bit brutal compared to the stock item, and this part here of course is where the Moto scope will be located. Part of me wants to try and angle it a bit, smooth off those rather abrupt right angles, but it may be a bit too much of a challenge for me to be able to machine that. What I'll do next is machine away these corners from the front elevation, which will bring the yoke down closer to the depth of the actual fork clamps. I'm not going to bring it right to the dimensions at this point, a bit like I've done for these back edges. I'm going to leave 2, maybe 3 mil excess, which I can then come back and finish later. I need to consider this corner here because I'm probably going to want to put a radius in there, as I've got a plan radius for the top corner. A quick explanation on the setup. Firstly, the aluminium block has been clamped to the table. I've done this with the dial gauge so that this front face is now parallel or aligned to the axis of the table. It's as good as I can get with the accuracy of this machine, so I was getting an indication of less than 0.02 millimeter run out along its length. The second point to note is that the centre of the quill is now directly above our reference corner, the left hand and the front face, and that has been set up into the DRO as 0 on the X and 0 on the Y. So all my measurements on the DRO will now be with respect to that corner. In the quill is a 15mm slot drill, so I'm going to use that to remove this shoulder. So roughly speaking, something like that is what I'm going to take off now. Again, I'm not going to take it right up to the respective edges. I'm going to leave at least 3 mil to finish off later on, so this is only be a rough cut at this point. I'm now going to move the table across by 191.5 millimeters. That will take me out to this edge, plus 3.5 millimeters, plus half of the diameter of that slot drill, which is 7.5 millimeters. So you can't see that on the DRO, but the DRO is currently showing 191.495 millimeters. That is the first side roughed out. I'll now go and do the other side. As we can see, both the corners have been removed from the stock material, as have the 2 shoulders for the fork leg clamps. It all looks quite unsightly and out of proportion, but do bear in mind, as I've said a couple of times, none of these dimensions are yet final. The only finished face I have on this whole lump is what is going to be the front edge here, and even the profile for that is going to change. There's material to come off all of the other faces, not least of course the steering yoke clamp there at the back of the yoke. With the bulk of the excess material now removed, we'll wrap this video up here, and for the next video I will make a start and progress the drilling and the boring of the holes for the fork legs.